That squirrel in your yard right now, the one sitting on the fence or digging near the garden or watching you from the tree, it knows your face. Not in a vague general sense. Not just human near me, it knows your face specifically. It has catalogued you. It has built a profile of you over weeks or months of careful observation. And the way it behaves around you today is the direct result of everything it remembers about every interaction you've ever had with it. This isn't speculation. This is what the science actually shows. And once you understand exactly how a squirrel's memory works, you'll never look at the one in your yard the same way again. Let's start with what makes squirrel memory so unusual. Most people think of squirrels as small, reactive animals. See food, eat food, see danger, run. But that mental model is completely wrong. Squirrels are among the most cognitively sophisticated small mammals on the planet, and a huge part of that sophistication is memory. The most well-known version of squirrel memory is spatial. Eastern gray squirrels bury thousands of food caches every autumn, sometimes up to 0 separate locations in a single season, and they find most of them, not by smell alone, by memory, by a spatial map they construct and maintain in their hippocampus, the brain region responsible for navigation and memory. Studies have shown that squirrels can recall the location of a buried nut months after hiding it, accounting for landmarks that have changed, even after snowfall has completely altered the visual landscape. That is not the brain of a simple animal. But spatial memory is just one layer. What researchers have documented more recently is something called episodic-like memory in squirrels. Episodic memory is the ability to remember specific events, not just facts, but the what, where, and when of a particular experience. For a long time, scientists thought episodic memory was unique to humans. Then they found it in great apes, then birds, and then, in multiple studies of sirid behavior, they found strong evidence of it in squirrels. What this means is that your squirrel doesn't just know that your yard is a place with food. It remembers the specific morning you threw peanuts near the fence. It remembers the afternoon a dog scared it while it was eating near the patio. It remembers the week the feeding stopped. And it remembers the person who was present during each of those moments. Which brings us to the part that should make you sit up. Individual recognition. Multiple field studies have confirmed that eastern gray squirrels distinguish between individual humans. Not just big human versus small human, not just person moving fast versus person standing still, individual humans. Different people are treated differently by the same squirrel based on that squirrel's specific history with each person. The mechanism is primarily visual. Squirrels are highly visual animals with excellent resolution at medium distances. They process faces, proportions, movement patterns, gait, even clothing to some degree, but face and movement are the primary identifiers. Here's how researchers figured this out. In controlled studies, the same squirrel was approached by two different people. One who had previously fed it, one who had not. The squirrel's alert distance, how close a person could get before the squirrel began watching intently, and its flight distance, how close before the squirrel fled, were measurably different depending on which person approached. The person with the feeding history could get significantly closer. The new stranger triggered flight behavior much earlier. Same squirrel, same time of day, same location, different human, different response. That's not a coincidence. That's a stored memory being applied to a present situation. And it doesn't stop at feeding. Squirrels track threat history just as carefully as they track food sources. If you've ever startled a squirrel, moved suddenly, let a dog run at it, picked up something that looked like a threat, that squirrel filed it. It updated your profile. The next time you approached, your alert distance increased. Your flight distance increased. You became slightly less safe than you were before. This recalibration isn't permanent. Squirrels are pragmatic animals. If you spend the next 2 weeks behaving in a low-threat way, moving slowly, offering food, making no sudden movements, your threat rating comes back down. The squirrel is not holding a grudge. It's running a continuously updated risk assessment. And you are one of the variables. Now here is the part that most people find genuinely surprising. Your squirrel doesn't just remember what you did. It remembers the time pattern of what you did. Squirrels are extraordinarily attuned to routine. They learn when food appears in a location. They learn the daily movement patterns of every regular presence in their territory. If you go into your garden every morning at a similar time, your squirrel knows this. It may already be in position before you arrive, not because it got lucky, because it learned your schedule. Researchers studying urban squirrels found that squirrels in areas with regular human feeding activity began appearing in the feeding location before the feeder arrived, suggesting they had internalized the timing of that specific human's behavior. They weren't responding to the person, they were anticipating them. Your squirrel has also been observing your body language in detail you probably haven't considered. The angle of your approach matters. Walking directly toward a squirrel reads as predator behavior. Straight-line movement is what hunting animals do. Walking at an angle, or pausing and looking away, reads as non-threatening. Squirrels track this. They differentiate people who walk straight and look directly at them from people who move indirectly and avert their gaze. Your speed matters. Your posture matters. Whether you carry objects matters. A person holding a bag is filed differently than a person with empty hands, because something being carried represents an unknown, and unknowns register as higher risk. Over time, your squirrel has built a comprehensive behavioral model of you. It knows how you move. It knows when you're likely to appear. And it knows whether you've been a source of food, a source of neutral noise, or a source of threat. Let's talk about what that looks like in practice. If your squirrel lets you get close, closer than it lets other people, that's not a coincidence. That is the behavioral output of a stored positive memory of you. You have, over time, accumulated enough low-threat, positive interactions that your squirrel's internal model of you is safe, possibly useful, not a predator. If your squirrel approaches you when it approaches no one else, that's a further step. It has evaluated you as not just safe, but actively worth interacting with. The risk calculation came out in your favor, and if your squirrel makes eye contact with you, holds your gaze for a moment before going back to what it was doing, that's recognition behavior. It has identified you, it's done a brief assessment, and it's decided you are the known entity you were last time, and not a threat. There's a concept in animal behavior research called the deer-enemy effect. It describes the phenomenon where animals that would normally treat each other as threats become more tolerant of a familiar individual than of a stranger. The familiar individual is less unpredictable. Their behavior has been modeled. They are paradoxically safer than an unknown. You may have become your squirrel's dear enemy. Not an enemy in any hostile sense, but the known, modeled, familiar presence that registers as less dangerous than any stranger your squirrel might encounter. That is a form of relationship. Not the kind with words or gestures, but a real neurologically grounded, behavior-shaping relationship built on memory and observation. There's one more layer to this that's worth understanding. Your squirrel shares information, not verbally, not consciously, but through behavior. Other squirrels in your yard observe how the established squirrel interacts with you. A squirrel that watches another squirrel approach you calmly, accept food, and leave without incident updates its own model of you based on that observation. This is called social learning, and it's well documented in cyrids. It's part of how young squirrels learn which humans are safe. They don't always build that model from scratch. They partially inherit it from the behavioral patterns of squirrels who were there before them, which means the reputation you've built with one squirrel may over time transfer to others. The new squirrel in your yard may already start with a slightly more favorable model of you, because it watched the squirrel that's been there longer, and that squirrel isn't afraid of you. So the next time your backyard squirrel looks at you, really looks at you, understand what's actually happening. It's running a recognition check. It's cross-referencing you against a stored model it has built over weeks or months of observation. It's deciding in real time whether you are the same entity it remembers, whether the risk calculus has changed, and whether the expected outcome of this interaction is positive or negative. And somewhere in that small, sharp, extraordinarily capable brain, there is a record of you. What you did, when you did it, how you moved, whether you were safe. Your squirrel knows your face.